Section 1. Two ways of thinking. Inside Kahneman's thinking, fast and slow. Have you ever wondered why you make certain decisions? Why do you sometimes act impulsively, and other times you carefully weigh your options? Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, explores these questions in his groundbreaking book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. Kahneman argues that our minds operate using two distinct systems, System 1, fast thinking, and System 2, slow thinking. System 1 is our intuitive, automatic system. It's what helps us make quick judgments and navigate familiar situations. Imagine driving a car on an empty road. You're probably not consciously thinking about every little detail. That's System 1 at work. System 2, on the other hand, is our deliberate and analytical system. It's what we use for complex problem solving, like calculating a complex math problem. System 2 requires effort and focus. It helps us analyze situations logically and make more rational choices. Understanding these two systems is crucial for making better decisions. By becoming aware of how our minds work, we can learn to identify and mitigate the biases that can lead us astray. Section 2, System 1, the autopilot within. System 1 is the fast part of our thinking. It operates automatically, quickly, and often without our conscious awareness. This system is essential for our survival. It's what allows us to react quickly to danger, like slamming on the brakes when a car suddenly cuts us off. Think of System 1 as our brain's autopilot. It relies on intuition, emotions, and mental shortcuts, heuristics to make rapid judgments. These shortcuts are generally helpful, but they can also lead to systematic errors in judgment, known as cognitive biases. Here are a few examples of how System 1 operates. Recognizing faces. You instantly recognize a friend's face without consciously analyzing their features. Driving a familiar route, you can drive home from work without actively thinking about the directions. Completing common phrases. You can easily finish the phrase bread, and System 1 is powerful, but it's also prone to biases and errors. By understanding its limitations, we can become more aware of our own thinking patterns. Section 3. Cognitive shortcuts. When our thinking takes shortcuts. Our brains are constantly bombarded with information. To cope with this overload, we rely on cognitive shortcuts or heuristics to simplify decision-making. These mental shortcuts are like rules of thumb that help us make quick judgments. They're generally useful, but they can also lead to predictable errors in thinking. For example, imagine you're trying to decide which restaurant to go to. You might be more likely to choose the one that's familiar to you, even if there are other, potentially better options available. This is known as the availability heuristic. We tend to judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily we can recall similar examples. Here are some other common cognitive biases. Confirmation bias. We tend to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. Framing effect. The way information is presented can influence our choices. Loss aversion. We feel the pain of a loss more strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Understanding these biases is crucial for making better decisions. By recognizing when our thinking is being influenced by shortcuts, we can pause and engage our more deliberate System 2. Section 4. The anchoring effect. Why first impressions matter. The anchoring effect is a cognitive bias that demonstrates the powerful influence of initial information on our subsequent judgments. It occurs when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, the anchor, when making decisions. This initial anchor can have a significant impact on our perceptions and choices, even if it's completely irrelevant to the decision at hand. For example, imagine you're negotiating the price of a used car. The seller might start by suggesting a ridiculously high price. Even though you know it's too high, that initial anchor can influence your perception of a fair price. You might be willing to pay more than you would have if the seller had started with a lower, more reasonable offer. The anchoring effect has been demonstrated in a wide range of settings, from salary negotiations to consumer purchasing decisions. It highlights the importance of being aware of the potential influence of irrelevant information on our judgments. Section 5. The power of framing how we say things makes a difference. The framing effect illustrates how the way information is presented or framed can significantly influence our choices, even if the underlying options are objectively the same. Our decisions are often swayed by whether the options are presented in terms of potential gains or losses. For example, imagine you're faced with a choice between two medical treatments for a disease. Treatment A has a 70% survival rate. Treatment B has a 30% mortality rate. Both treatments are statistically equivalent, but people are more likely to choose treatment A because it's framed in terms of the positive outcome, survival. The negative framing of treatment B, mortality, makes it less appealing even though the odds are the same. The framing effect highlights the importance of considering how information is presented to us. We should try to reframe information in multiple ways to avoid being unduly influenced by the initial framing. Section 6. Loss aversion. The pain of losing is stronger than the joy of gaining. Loss aversion is a powerful cognitive bias that describes our tendency to feel the pain of a loss more strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. In other words, we're more motivated to avoid losses than we are to achieve gains. This bias is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. Think about it. Losing something you already have, like money or possessions, represents a threat to your survival. Gaining something new, while desirable, is less essential for immediate survival. Loss aversion can lead us to make irrational decisions. For example, we might hold on to a losing investment for too long because we're reluctant to accept the loss, even if it's logically the best course of action. Understanding loss aversion can help us make more rational decisions by recognizing when our fear of losing is clouding our judgment. Section 7, System 2, the effortful thinker. System 2 is the deliberate analytical part of our thinking. It's what we use for effortful mental activities like solving complex problems, making difficult decisions, and controlling our impulses. Unlike System 1, which operates automatically, System 2 requires conscious effort and focus. Imagine you're trying to solve a difficult math problem. You can't rely on your intuition or mental shortcuts. You need to engage your System 2, focusing your attention, retrieving relevant information from memory, and applying logical rules to arrive at a solution. While System 2 is capable of rational thought, it's also lazy and resource-intensive. We tend to avoid engaging System 2 unless it's absolutely necessary. This is why we often rely on System 1's quick judgments, even when those judgments might be flawed. Section 8. The experiencing self versus the remembering self. Two sides of the same coin. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, Kahneman introduces the concept of the experiencing self and the remembering self. These two selves represent distinct ways we experience and remember our lives. The experiencing self lives in the present moment. It's the part of us that feels sensations, emotions, and pleasure or pain. Imagine you're eating a delicious meal. The experiencing self is savoring every bite, fully immersed in the sensory experience. The remembering self, on the other hand, is responsible for storing and retrieving memories of our experiences. It's the part of us that reflects on the past and tells stories about our lives. The remembering self might recall the delicious meal you had last week, even if you're not currently experiencing it. Interestingly, the remembering self doesn't always accurately reflect the experiences of the experiencing self. Our memories are often biased by peak moments and endings. This means that we tend to remember experiences based on their most intense moments, good or bad, and how they ended, rather than the overall average of the experience.